So welcome to the closing session of the Africa Regional Resilience Hub that's been going for the last 4 days, and where the intention was to harvest African priorities, actions, solutions, and challenges that will be amplified at the COP27 Resilience Hub. So first off, I would like to start by thanking all of you, the session organizers and participants, for your excellent thought-provoking sessions, for organizing and animating your sessions and keeping things under control and always on time. However, most importantly, I would like to thank all the participants. Without your active input, ideas, and discussion via the chat, via raising your hands, etc., these 4 days would not have been the success it is. And earlier today, when I was putting together my notes, I was reflecting on the 4 days. And it is very clear to me that we have had active African participation, with Africans talking about what matters for us and presenting real contextual solutions to the climate crisis that's facing us. And secondly, and I think very importantly for me, is that there's this growing sense that the time for talking is over and the time for action is here. And this is action around many things, but for me, there were 3 that were quite at the forefront when I looked at the 4 days. It's about setting up financing facilities that provide funding for local climate action that is both patient and predictable and is not dependent on government. And then it was around integrating the locally led adaptation into the UNF processes, particularly via the global goal on adaptation. And my third takeaway, which is which speaks to the work that we as CDKN and SouthSouthNorth, the work we do and that we intend doing, is to use locally led adaptation as a vehicle for climate justice and to show solidarity. So those were my 3 takeaways from the 4 days. And I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Michelle, who's director for the Africa program, and she will talk through her reflections. And after her, she'll hand over to Emil, who will then talk through what this means for the Race to Resilience and the bigger Resilience Hub at COP. Over to you, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Shehnaaz. And I just really want to echo the words that you've said about, thanking the participants and the session organizers and the speakers. It really has been an honor and a privilege to be part of this hub. So as a team, we've been working ardently to get to harvest all the messages coming from the sessions, to collate them and to synthesize them. And we're going to build these into a formal document, formal official messages that we're going to take to COP27. And Emil is going to talk about that a bit more after I've talked. So we've had dedicated rapporteurs, we've had graphic harvests, tweets, recordings, and all of these we're going to use to feed into this official messaging. What I'm going to do now is just talk a little bit from a more unofficial and informal perspective of what the key messages have meant for me. And they've centered around 4 areas. We're also going to have a Mentimeter, so we'll put that Mentimeter up at the end so we can get your input into what you think the key messages have been. So for me, the 4 messages are, the first one is that throughout the hub, I've heard the call for inclusive and equitable climate action and the need for local expertise and solutions to lead adaptation and resilience action, and for these to be culturally led and deeply contextual. and that we really need to dig deeper into what locally led adaptation means in reality and how to make it happen, so that it doesn't just become a buzzword that actually prevents locally led adaptation from happening and perpetuates the marginalization that is the status quo at the moment. So we've heard about living lab approaches, we've had some intersectional approaches, we've had approaches where all segments of communities and different groupings have been approached, and also calls for approaches where there's been multiple intervention points. And these have all been ways in which we've been looking, or the Africans have been looking how to make locally led adaptation really locally led. I've also been listening to speakers and participants highlighting the need for data, and that varied knowledge needs to be integrated into resilience planning and integration. So that is knowledge from the ancestors, from farmers, from community members, from the very rich cultures on the continent, as well as from academia and business. I learned that farmers are the best learners and teachers. And I also heard about the brilliant work that SDI, that Slum Dweller International Federations, are doing in prioritizing and leading the collection of data on the continent. The third call, or the third key message that came out for me, was the need to protect and enrich the vast resources that Africa possesses. That is our people, so it includes also women and girls, young people, and all people in our community, city dwellers, rural dwellers, slum dwellers. I learned that we must protect and enrich our water, our soils, and our businesses, that we need solutions for startups. We need to build our entrepreneurs and our young people to become entrepreneurs. We need to support flexible payment systems and use the technologies that we are using on the continent, mobile money and the use of mobile on the continent. And I think overall, what I experienced is that when Africans come together in all our diversity from the top of the continent, so we heard from Egypt and Tunisia all the way down to the tip here in Cape Town, where I'm speaking from. We covered West Africa, we had Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, we heard from Ugandans, Tanzanians, Kenyans, Angolans, Botswanas, all along the way. And I apologize if I've left everyone out. But I really saw that we are a dynamic people and that we collaborate as equals, that we reflect and are honest on what does work in our actions and what doesn't work in our actions, and that we're not afraid to get our hands dirty and work iteratively on finding out what the best solutions are. I must say I have been profoundly humbled and inspired by the expertise and the spirit, the strength and the knowledge that exists on this varied, complex and beautiful continent of ours. And I just want to thank you all for your inputs. I'm going to hand over to Emil now from the Global Resilience Partnership, and he's going to tell us practically how the official or the more formal messages that have come out of this hub are going to be brought to COP27, and also how the work of the high-level champions and the Race to Resilient movement, how all of this is going to be integrated into that work. And Emil, before I hand over to you, I just want to echo what Nicole Martins has just said in the last session, that there's nothing fair about the climate emergency, and that we really need to build a movement at this African COP, and that we need to speak up. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to you to see how we're going to make it happen. And thank you to all of you.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and hello, everyone. I'm joining you all from Johannesburg. Just to start off by saying it's such a pleasure to have seen the Africa Regional Hub unfold this week. It's certainly a culmination of months of incredibly hard work by the CDKN team, and a huge congratulations is in order to the CDKN team and certainly all of the organizations and participants that took part this week, as well as in the inaugural events that took place in Gabon during the Africa Regional Climate Week. So, of course, this is a closing plenary, but by no means is this the close of the Africa Regional Hub. The Africa Regional Hub is one of 4 4 regional hubs, including Latin America and the Caribbean, South Asia, and Asia Pacific. So as we discuss in this closing plenary, what do we do next? This is certainly not the close of the regional hubs, but rather one of the milestones, as Shehnaaz mentioned, in understanding the regionally contextualized solutions, challenges, priorities, etc., that we want to amplify into COP and beyond. So what do we mean by amplification? And I think this is something that I want to speak to directly. And I'll start by laying out the timeline of what happens moving forward from here. So certainly not going to be a small task for the CDKN team, as well as the other regional hub lead organizations, in synthesizing the key messages, solutions, etc., that have been discussed in the rich spaces that have been created by the regional hub lead organizations. So let me lay out a bit of a timeline. Let me lay out some of the key areas that we are going to look to channel these key messages and solutions, etc., into, and hopefully this will give more of a flavor of why these processes that we've built with the regional hubs is important, and to lend a bit more substance to what we mean when we say amplification into a global audience at COP27. So let's do it sequentially, and hopefully this will really flesh out this picture. So one of the key anchoring events, as all the regional hubs are working on their sessions, and this entire process that CDKN has undergone this week, is also taking place in South Asia, in Asia Pacific, and Latin America and the Caribbean. So one of the first anchoring events in which we will start to consolidate and find the synergies and linkages across these key messages from the different regions will be an event at the Community-Based Adaptation Conference, the 16th conference, or also known as CBA 16, that'll take place on the 3rd of October at 1 p.m. European time. I'll drop the link for registration into the chat. That event is going to be a cross-regional hub discussion on what the key messages will be emerging out of the regional hubs, and trying to create a dynamic cross-regional discussion on this entire process that we've undergone over the last few months. We'll have representation from the high-level champions who will also be there to respond and receive these key messages. In addition to that, we are arranging for a briefing with the high-level champions in which the regional hubs will be able to engage with them directly and to be able to provide a briefing on the key messages, etc. And just to take a step back thereafter, is looking at the Resilience Hub as the home to the Race to Resilience. So a bit of background on the Race to Resilience. It is a campaign that brings together a plethora of partners, which aims to catalyze action by non-state actors that builds the resilience of 4 billion people from vulnerable groups and communities by 2030. A key component of the breakthroughs, of the Race to Resilience are the resilience breakthroughs, 10 of which were announced at the New York Climate Action Week yesterday, with an additional approximately 20 that will be further released and discussed during COP27 itself. So what are the breakthroughs? The breakthroughs are high impact solutions to be a guiding star for non-state actors and industry players to build resilience. We want to combine the efforts across various existing initiatives and to synthesize what are the major solutions and steps that are needed for systems transformation across a range of different systems, including agriculture, human settlements, natural ecosystems, etc. And this reflects industry progress that's been made. It's not creating new targets, but rather collating the science and initiatives and where there's consensus on what needs to be done. So we will now engage the Race to Resilience team and the teams that are working on the breakthroughs to find how these key messages can lend face to these high-level breakthroughs and bring in regionally contextual understanding of the priorities and solutions, etc. It's great to hear the reflections from Shehnaaz and Michelle, particularly the emphasis on locally led adaptation and how do we meaningfully bring in the priorities, solutions, and needs of communities on the ground, and really recognizing them as not just beneficiaries or recipients, but as key partners in the decision-making, governance, and implementation of ambitious climate action. So that's just to lend a bit of light in terms of how we will start working with the high-level champions team to start feeding in these key messages for their consideration and working with them to give these illustrative examples emerging out of the regions. Looking to COP27 itself and the Resilience Hub, we'll be working with all of the regional hubs and the thematic leads for the Resilience Hub that will be hosting Blue Zone hybrid events and finding opportunities for integrating these key messages into their sessions, as well as providing suggestions of speakers, moderators, and organizations that have emerged out of the regions through the regional hub process and how they can further add value with regional voices into those respective sessions. So I'll leave it there in terms of how we're going to be working over the coming weeks and months. And also just to say as well, the high-level champions have a significant platform at COP27, and being able to provide these regionally contextualized narratives, solutions, etc., I think is going to be an important contribution to what they say in the various different doors and platforms that they have access to. So let me leave it there. And Shehnaaz, am I handing it back over to you?
Yes, thank you, Amil. Thank you very much for that. And I think we're all looking very much forward to engaging further at COP especially. Apologies to the team and the participants. I had to introduce a Menti question, 2 questions that we'd like your input on. And the link and the code will be shared in the chat box. The first question is, what do you think is the key message that should be taken to the COP27 Resilience Hub? These questions will be written up in the Menti as well. And the second one, what has inspired you over the past 4 days? So we're really looking forward to get your input on that. So if you want to reflect on that, and contribute in the Menti. And so in closing, thank you to Michelle and Amil for bringing things together and explaining how it will all move forward. But I must say, I'm very happy that in the last 4 days, we have exceeded my most optimistic expectations in all respects, in terms of the outcomes for this, what impact we could possibly have, the level of participation. And I think, as you all might know, when you're planning an event, you're always quite anxious in terms of how many people will pitch up. We've had packed sessions through the 4 days, and it's been very interactive. And so just again to thank all the participants, because I think this is really an important conversation that needs to be taken forward, and we commit to taking that forward at COP. And in closing, I think I'm actually really humbled and privileged to be working with the most amazing team. I would like to thank them because literally, they've taken an idea and turned it into a reality, and it's no mean task. I mean, for me, sitting on the side where everything seems to be working fine, and then to see them in the background, all the effort that goes in. So I'd like to mention them all by name and then ask if afterwards we can all just put our cameras on and maybe just give them a round of applause. So and I'm doing it in alphabetical order, so no one takes anything personally, hopefully. There's Amanda, Amil, Lesego, Lisa, Lucia, Olivia, Uliswa, and Zizipo. So if they could first put their cameras on, so we can all get to see them. There we've got Amil, Michelle, Lesego, Amanda, Zizi, Lucia, Lisa, and where you Liswa? Oh, I found you, and Olivia. And so if the rest of us, if you're able to put your camera on, and I'd like to just give them all a round of applause. And I see the graphic harvester. I see a colleague, Josh. Yes, Josh. So a round of applause to the amazing team. And to all of you that have stuck with us for the 4 days, thank you. And please do keep watching our social media handles, our website, etc. And then we'll be doing lots of exciting things at COP. So thank you, everyone, and all the best.